Rugrats Kwanzaa is the 13th episode of the 7th season of Rugrats, and there are some really good things about this, but I have to say I don't feel that much more knowledgeable about Kwanzaa. I was aware of Kwanzaa, I know or knew very little about it, and to be honest, having watched this episode, I still know very, very little about it, which is surprising because when Rugrats have addressed other holidays, I feel like they've really helped to depict those holidays, that culture, where they come from. There are a lot of the vocabulary is very centered around that holiday, and I learn a lot of words associated with those holidays and traditions. And that's really not the case with this episode, and I feel really not any more knowledgeable than I did beforehand. There are some inspiring quotes in this episode. I'll talk about those in a moment. And I thought it was quite moving and a really nice look at Susie's family. But in terms of being an episode about Kwanzaa, I feel not that much more knowledgeable, so I'm a little bit disappointed with that in mind. It does focus on Susie and her family, and her Aunt T comes to visit, which I thought was a pretty great name. And Aunt T's voiced by Irma P. Hall. And Susie feels like she's not a great person because everybody in her family has trophies, they've won awards, they've done these seemingly great things, and Kwanzaa's partly about celebrating great people, and Susie feels unworthy and like she shouldn't be able to take part in celebrations because she's not a great person. And her aunt helps her to realise that she is, and there's a great line in this. I didn't write down the quote exactly, but it was something to the effect of a lot of great people don't become famous, and a lot of great people do things without getting awards for it. And I thought that was a really nice thing to reinforce, that just because somebody isn't famous or renowned or award winning, it doesn't mean they're not great and that they don't do great things. And I think that's something that everybody can do well to remember, because I think a lot of us measure, absolutely myself included, measure our greatness on how successful we are in other people's eyes. And that's not always, in fact, that's rarely going to be the case. And I think that the episode was doing a good thing to kind of reinforce that message. There's also a great quote, and I did write this down, and the quote is, "Don't let fear keep you from doing what you love." We got to see Susie's mother when she was younger, little Lucy, singing in the choir with a solo, and it was just absolutely adorable. And I rather enjoyed that aspect of it, and we get to see a flashback of Aunt T meeting, I won't say who, but, well, actually, I will, because I think it makes the episode quite important. She meets Martin Luther King. And I think that that might be a lot of young people's, at least certainly if you're not part of that culture, it might be a lot of young people's introductions to Martin Luther King. I don't remember watching this episode as a child, but if I did, it probably would have been my introduction to Martin Luther King. It doesn't really explain who he is or what he did, and I feel like that's maybe okay because that's a little bit too heavy for Rugrats, but it's nice to get that name out there for children to start to think about who this person is, and what such an incredible impact he had on the lives of many, many people. So it's an informative educational episode in some ways, but ultimately I don't feel like I know that much more about Kwanzaa. I don't feel like I have a good grasp of the traditions surrounding it, which again is quite bizarre because when it comes to when they addressed the various Jewish holidays, I felt like I learned a lot. Absolutely not the case here, and I'm a little bit disappointed by that. I also feel like the babies shouldn't have bothered even being in this. They didn't really have an important role to play, and it almost took away from the fact that Susie's family is important. It's kind of like they're saying Susie's family has a story to tell, but in order to do that we need to bring in the other characters. And that's not the case. The babies were basically not in it whenever it was important and whenever the important messages were being delivered, and the episode absolutely 100% would have worked without them. And I think actually by removing the babies it would have made room for us to learn more about Kwanzaa, and I think that would have been such a better decision. So actually it's not a great episode. I think it set out to do something and it didn't do a good job with it. And by including the babies as padding, that's literally all they're there for. It's kind of saying, well, we have this important story to tell, but we can't do it without bringing in the other characters, and that's rubbish because the good bits of the episode or the ones where it's just Susie and Aunt T, or Susie and her siblings and Aunt T, or other members of her family. The scenes with the babies are just irrelevant and didn't add anything. So I think they turned it into a bit of a mess, to be perfectly honest. I think in a way it's a good thing because it's getting the word Kwanzaa out there. It can make people start to think about it. But the episode itself, I don't think was very good at all. There is a significant amount of room for improvement with this one.